Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. I invite everyone to rise and join Council in the singing of O Canada. Thank you, everybody. Please be seated. All right, Madam Clerk, I understand we have regrets from Councillor Duddock, and perhaps Councillor Grant will join us in mid-flight. Council, you have the minutes of the regular session of Council dated April 29th and the special session dated May 6th, and the confidential minutes from May 6th, and the minutes of the Planning and Development session of Council on May 13th, and the minutes of the special session of Council on May 16th. Do you have corrections? If not, kind of a mover and seconder for approval. Moved by Councillor Lischina, seconded by Councillor Giddings. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The minutes are approved. We have no public presentations, but we do have a delegation from Sandra King on the Town Square Rehabilitation Project, item 2 of the Community Services Committee meeting of May 21st. And I understand from Ms. King that she doesn't feel she needs to delegate, and she's signifying assent. So thank you very much for being here, and I trust you're happy with the outcome. With that, the Community Services Committee report is next, and item 4, the information report, Modernizing Ontario's Environmental Assessment Program, discussion paper, and Environmental Assessment Act was referred to Council without a recommendation. And that means that the committee thought that the entire council and the members of the public needed to see and consider this information. So I will turn to the commissioner for the presentation. And here she comes now. Council, while she's setting up, is there a mover and seconder to adopt the standing committee reports? Councillor Elgar and Councillor Knoll, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Councillor Adams.
I assume we're delaying this one.
Yes, sir. That's carried. And we will then deal with we will receive item 4 when the presentation is ready. Ms. Stevens, we're ready if you are.
Tonight's presentation is regarding the Ministry of Community, Ministry of the Conservation and Parks proposal to make amendments to the Environmental Assessment Program. As part of their proposal, they released a discussion paper approximately 1 month ago outlining their proposed changes, and tonight's staff report outlines our comments on those proposed changes. There are 2 primary types of environmental assessments in Ontario. Individual environmental assessments, or EAs, and these are typically the processes we follow for large, complex projects where the terms of reference need to be approved, and then there are multiple steps that you follow to deal with those large-scale infrastructure projects. And then there are class EAs, and that's what council would be most familiar with in terms of what we've been presenting to you most recently. There's the municipal class EA that we deal with for our infrastructure projects. And then the Ministry of Transportation or Metrolinx or some other provincial agencies and ministries have their own class processes as well. And these deal with projects that are typically routine and the ones that would be repeated over and over by those types of agencies. They generally have predictable outcomes as well. In addition to those two types of environmental assessment processes, there are some regulations that exempt certain types of projects from some or all of the EA Act requirements. These deal with transit, electricity, and waste management. Transit projects would be the ones, again, that would be coming to this council to deal with. That process starts with the identification of a transit project and moves forward from that, as opposed to looking at alternatives for how we would provide that transportation capacity. A key difference with those regulations is that they can only be appealed, or a Part 2 order request can be made only on the grounds of something of provincial significance or on an Aboriginal or treaty right. So the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks is proposing 4 primary changes to the EA Act. These changes are proposed to provide better alignment between the level of assessment required for a project and the level of environmental risk associated with that work. They're looking to eliminate duplication between the environmental assessment and other processes under which we were required to get approvals once we've got the EA approval in place. To find efficiencies in order to shorten the timelines. In particular, the timelines would be dealing with Part 2 order requests and getting responses on those. Part 2 order requests can often take over a year to get a decision, and then at that point, they're generally the Part 2 order request is denied, or they're denied with conditions. And then also looking to modernize the process by going digital and permitting online submissions and providing the public with an opportunity to view the material online as well. This has typically been a paper-based process, and we want to make sure that the information is accessible to the public. 2 early actions that are related to those 4 proposed changes are exempting low-risk projects from EA requirements, and that's low risk from an environmental perspective, and improving that timeliness of Part 2 order decisions. One of the different classes of class environmental assessments is the municipal class EA. And as I mentioned, this is the process that we use when we are planning new infrastructure projects for transportation or for stormwater. The Municipal Engineers Association and municipalities are the proponents of this EA process. Similar to the proposals that the ministry has put forward to change the overall EA process, the MEA is requesting changes as well, looking to better align the level of risk of a project with the level of assessment required, to exempt Schedule A and A+ projects from Part 2 order request potential. So the A and A+ projects would be the most routine or the lowest risk projects. Looking for timely decisions on Part 2 orders and delegating some of that decision-making responsibility to the director level at the ministry. Just as an example, I wanted to provide council with a summary of some of the types of Schedule A and A+ projects. These are often routine operation or maintenance activities or low-risk projects from an environmental perspective. And they're the normal or emergency operations of our road network or other paved facilities. Things like cleaning out roadside ditches or maybe reshaping them. Localized operational or safety improvements such as guide rails or other small focused projects. Addressing drainage issues by increasing the size of a culvert due to the change of the drainage area, or pavement markings. So not any constructed changes, but pavement markings to redesignate existing lanes. So this could be changes with respect to parking lanes or cycling lanes. Because these are deemed to be the low risk types of projects, the minimum requirements for public notification are generally focused on notification as opposed to consultation. But we always have the potential to go above and beyond based on the requirements outside of the environmental risk, the community requirements for notification, input, and consultation. The EA process itself does include a duty to consult with all impacted stakeholders. The EA consultation requirements are minimum requirements, though, based on the type of the project. Regardless of whether some of these projects or types of projects become exempt from the EA requirements, staff would continue to assess the projects based on not only their EA schedule, but the type of project, their location, the scale of the project, and other factors, including past consultation, past experience on similar types of projects, to make sure that we have the right type of public process in place before proceeding with implementing these projects. And again, that could be notification, outreach, input, and consultation, and would be tailored to the specific project. So based on our review of the discussion paper that was released by the ministry, and staff support a review of the different project types to make sure that we are aligning the type of level of assessment with the level of environmental risk. And we support a review to look at opportunities to reduce overlap and to streamline the process. We welcome the review of the Part 2 order request process to try and improve the timeliness of that, because it does impact our ability to deliver on our capital works. Anything that can improve our ability to submit or public's opportunity to submit comments to that in the review process is welcome. And right now there are no restrictions on who can submit a Part 2 order request. So a review of that to focus on stakeholders and people that are affected by the project as opposed to just anybody would be welcome as well. So the report recommendations as they were presented or in the CSC agenda last Tuesday were to receive the report, to forward a copy to the ministry as our comments on the proposed changes, and also to share our comments with the Municipal Engineers Association. However, for consistency with the Bill 108 report that's also on tonight's agenda, we're recommending or asking that this additional recommendation be considered by Council to request additional time to ensure that we have the right amount of time to review and provide comments on not only this application or proposed change, but also on future changes and proposals to change provincial policies, legislation, and plans. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you for the presentation. Just quickly, restrictions on who can request a Part 2 order. Who is the who?
Through you, Mayor Burton. Right now, there are no restrictions. You don't have to be within the study area. You don't have to have participated in the process. So different from a planning application where you need to have made a submission of some type. During the process, anybody would have the right to request this Part 2 order at this time. We would like to see a change where somebody who has to have a vested interest in the project and have participated in the process before they can put forward a request.
So a qualified engineer who happens to live in the area but isn't involved could not, going forward, put in a Part 2 order like they used to be able to do?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we would hope that person would participate during the project, or perhaps they would be providing comments on behalf of other interested stakeholders who were in the study area and who had participated. We recognize that there may be a desire to get somebody with qualifications or deemed as an expert to provide comments on behalf of a group. But right now, you don't have to live in Ontario. You don't have to have any tie to the project whatsoever, even if you don't have to be in the study area at all. So tightening that up a little bit, because every time we get a Part 2 order request, we're probably delayed at least a year before we can move forward with the project. So we would want to ensure that people are providing their comments earlier in the process so we can deal with them and hopefully head off any Part 2 order requests.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Even when I think of a Part 2, I'm just thinking of the timelines they're giving you to respond to this new idea. And
Yeah.
it seems like it's totally inadequate, what you're saying. The chances are they're going to move it 60 days like you want. Move it 60 days out further?
Well, through you, Mayor Burton, so right now, generally, when we post a Class EA, we provide either 30 or 45 days, maybe 60, depending on the time of the year, for people to provide their part to order request or submit their part to order request. What we're asking for is that there's more time given for us to comment on these proposals, because
Right.
really what we had was the discussion paper. We're hoping that there will be more opportunity to provide comments once the specific types of projects are brought forward, because right now it's really just a list that says low risk or this general type of project.
So do you agree with what they claim? Is there going to be a definition of low risk other than what you put in here? So that it's very clear to everyone? Or are you just making general ideas how you think it'll be low risk? Or is that they're saying what it'll be?
Through you, Mayor Burton, one of the comments in the discussion paper was about providing lists of projects that would be required to follow EA requirements and projects that would then therefore be exempt. So that clarification would be definitely welcome.
It'll be fun. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, is there a mover and seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Adams and Councillor Elgar. May I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Yes, the recommendations. Discussion item number 1 is the usually good news from Oakville Enterprises Annual General Meeting and Financial Update, approval of the 2018 consolidated financial statements, directors' remuneration, appointment of auditors, and appointment of directors and chair. And if we give our attention to Mr. Rob Lister, the President and CEO of Oakville Enterprises Corporation, he will summarize for the public the material that we all have studied. Mr. Lister, welcome. And we look forward to your information. And Madam Chair, also good to have you here.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I'm going to introduce Marie Oswald, our Chair of the Board, who's going to make some opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Good evening, Mayor Burton, councillors. My name is Marie Oswald, as Rob said, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening for the 2019 Annual General Meeting of Oakville Enterprises Corporation, or OEC, as we like to call it. Our presentation today is going to focus on raising organizational performance. Let me get that slide. There we go. And we'll do that through brand personification. We'll talk about our key accomplishments, our overall performance, and then a 2018 financial update. As you know, the town is the sole shareholder of Oakville Enterprises Corporation, which is the parent company of Oakville Hydro, and several other companies involved in the provision of energy and infrastructure services. Before I turn the podium back to Rob Lister, I would like to take this opportunity to say a few words about the Board of Directors of OEC and Oakville Hydro. Oh, what happened there? Okay. The key role of the board is to drive value creation while providing direction and oversight to the corporation. I'm pleased to confirm that we have a strong, high-performing board. Its members are selected based on a skills matrix that is updated regularly to reflect the needs of the corporation today and into the future. The directors are all Oakville residents who bring a significant depth of knowledge with executive-level experience. Regular board rotation has ensured new insights, refreshed perspectives, and a healthy diversity of thought. With me tonight are the following directors who are sitting in council with Rob Lister and his management team. I would ask each director to raise their hand as I mention his or her name. Mayor Burton. Cliff Inskip. Ray Green. David Brennan. Helen Palmer. Siobhan Byron, Sarah Lance, Lucy Kasasha, Cheryl Watson, and Heather Angel. Did I miss anyone? Okay. I'd now like to turn the podium over to Rob Lister for his update on what happened in 2018.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council. Very happy to be here again this evening to give an update on our progress over 2018, a little bit of update on year-to-date 2019. I would like to introduce my management team again, and we have a few new faces. So we have Karen Marner, our Chief Financial Officer, Scott Moody, Chief Operating Officer of Oakville Hydro, Sean McCoggan, our Chief Operating Officer of Energy and Infrastructure, Pat Spruan, our Corporate Secretary, Simon Abbott, Vice President of Human Resources, Doug Walton, Vice President of Business Development, Jody Chardo, Manager of Marketing Communications, and in new roles, we have Mary Caputi, Chief of Staff and Senior Vice President of Construction Operations, Jeff Mocha, Vice President of Enterprise Innovation, and Zoreen Fernandez, Vice President of People Excellence. So this evening, I will follow on my presentation and last update to Council in April, and also provide some updates on OEC and Oakville Hydro, as I mentioned, followed by Karen Marner providing an update on our 2018 financial results. I'll get there. I previously spoke about our people, leadership, innovation, and gender diversity, critical elements of our past and future successes. To grow and do better, we continually diversify our employee base to capture the gender diversity advantage. Our strategy is to advance our depth, our perspectives, and our performance. On the innovation front, here are some key initiatives and accomplishments. Advancing the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning, we're developing predictive scenarios for low ticket volumes that directly assist with improving our staff recruitment levels, timing, as well as work scheduling. Here on the screen are two examples of industry recognition we've recently received on innovation: the PricewaterhouseCoopers National Vision to Reality Program for creating innovative solutions that impact society and make Canada a better place, and the Canadian Electricity Award Centre of Excellence Award, CEA. Our electricity smart grid automation work applies highly complex distributed grid intelligence through advanced sensors, facilitating the network to automatically respond to changes in electrical grid conditions, restoring electricity to customers in seconds. Virtual reality applications are being developed for training orientation, specifically for bucket truck work, as well as interactive manhole visualizations, showcasing the potential for 3D scanning technology. We're also involving innovation with Ottenhive, an Oakville-based company that has patented a first-in-the-industry approach to secure authentication of mobile devices. The app in development will support customer access to electricity, water, and gas consumption information. So we have entered the fourth industrial revolution. The first electric lights seen in Oakville were installed on the west bank of 16 Mile Creek in 1889. Electricity, the foundation of the second industrial revolution. A number of years later, the Oakville Water and Light Commission was formed, and we have evolved to what we are today. The fourth industrial revolution is a way of describing the blurring of boundaries between the physical, digital, and biological worlds. It's a fusion of advances in artificial intelligence, robotics, genetic engineering, the Internet of Things, 3D printing, quantum engineering, and other technologies. It is massive digital transformation. We stand on the brink of technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. Its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything mankind has ever experienced before. OEC is paying attention and participating in this transformation. We will be leaders in contributing to the evolving and exciting customer experience. And through innovation, we are future-proofing our businesses. We've also been active in the industry. In particular, Mayor Caputi recently spoke and presented at 2 industry events. And Scott Moody is seen here with our Pete Michaud holding the award from the Electricity Distributors Association for environmental excellence. As Council knows, our participation and leadership in industry are strong builders of our brand and venues for insights to the benefit of our customers. In April, I provided an overview of the journey that OEC has been on for a number of years and the leadership philosophies that are making a difference. We have one overwhelming theme: ensuring our people and leaders are difference makers. The role of the leader is to create the environment where people bring the best version of them to work every day. And at OEC, we continue to say, be better than you were yesterday and better tomorrow than you were today. And I follow that with, leadership doesn't happen in a day, it happens daily. And this brings me to our brand message, and the personification of our brand. We continue to transform, lead, innovate, and commit to excellence. This is our brand, and we're working on getting our people to understand the journey that each of them is on that contributes to their success and the success of our businesses. The journeys go well beyond the office walls, the field work sites. The journeys reach into the communities, the industries, the charities, and homes. And we're keeping it simple. Live the brand. Lead, innovate, commit to excellence. We're empowering our employees to personify our brand in everything they do, to exhibit corresponding behaviors and create the resonating linkages between themselves and our focus on customers and being proactive. And is it working? Yes. One of our GTEL employees traveling through a jurisdiction outside of OEC's service area recently noticed a safety issue and that field markings were missing from a pole locate site. He checked the records, verified the missing information and markings, informed the constructor and the utility company. The deficiency was addressed and the construction work proceeded safely. Our employee was proactive, and this is just one example of our commitment to safety, to our customers, and to our brand. One slide. All right, going forward, sorry. OEC continues to grow as megatrends and technology disruption continue at an unprecedented pace. Through our 13 operating brands and 1,200 employees, we continue to explore and leverage the multitude of opportunities in front of us throughout Ontario and reaching beyond. We're very proud of our distribution system reliability, keeping the lights on at Oakville Hydro. In 2018, we again outperformed industry averages in both average numbers of interruptions and durations of interruptions. We have one of the most reliable systems in Canada. Over the year, the average number of interruptions experienced per customer was 1.5, and the average duration of the interruption was 3/4 of an hour. Both of these metrics are industry leading. And a new metric that is starting to be used is the outage duration time avoided through automation. In Oakville, in 2018, we estimated as a result of advanced grid automation through many years of investments, we cut the average outage duration in half. Reducing outages and outage duration, of course, is very important to the businesses, families, and individuals that we serve delivering electricity to in Oakville. We continue to be active participants in the Grid Smart City Cooperative. I'm currently vice chair of the organization. Grid Smart City draws its strength from the collaboration of 14-member medium-sized electricity utilities across Ontario. Combined, we average approximately $2.7 billion in assets and serve 737,000 customers across 25 communities. We bridge the need for innovation and infrastructure renewal with the benefits of collaboration and cost efficiency. We share resources, insights, and systems that help us operate smarter while advancing innovation, reliability, and efficiency across Ontario's electricity grid. We're one of Ontario's leading consortiums in the electricity sector, and to date, the cooperative has realized significant savings in wires, poles, and cable through our supply chain purchases. So at this point, I'm going to ask Karen Marner, our Chief Financial Officer, to come forward and talk about our 2018 financial results. Thank you. Karen?
OEC's goal is to deliver superior risk-adjusted returns to its shareholder. OEC has delivered these consistent returns through a portfolio of energy and infrastructure businesses, and OEC plans to continue to grow these businesses into new markets and with new customers. In summary, for 2018, our total comprehensive income was $4.1 million higher than in 2017. OEC demonstrates its financial strength through its balance sheet and the consistency of the annual payments contributed to the town of Oakville. In 2018, OEC provided a total of $13.3 million worth of payments to the town, including a dividend, capital leases, interest on debt, and payment for the provision of various services such as tree trimming. Coupled with the strong dividend, we continue to invest in the growth of the business. This is demonstrated by both our growth in our asset base and our shareholder equity compared to 2017. On May 1st, summer time of use hours came into effect for Oakville. The Ontario Energy Board announced that there would be little change to electricity prices for residential and small business customers under the regulated price plan. On-peak pricing increased by 0.2 cents per kilowatt hour, while off-peak and mid-peak have remained unchanged. At this time, we'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Giddings has one for you.
Thank you. This goes back to some of the comments that Mr. Lister made.
Okay.
I'm intrigued by the continual improvement through AI that you were talking about. I take it that the grid automation is tied into the grid intelligence. Is that proprietary or is that vendor supplied?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a lot of it is vendor supplied, and some of the work that we've done is to combine the proprietary technology from the various vendors, and we've done some work on ourselves, but it was more
So
about
it's open so that your staff, your engineers can work on that?
pieces of it. in
Pieces
terms
of it.
Integrating pieces of it, yes.
Other than, I understand outages, that's the easiest thing to understand. What else does that allow?
The technology?
Yes.
Yeah. It gives us a lot of insight into what's going on in the grid. In a lot of the cases, we have self-healing networks, and so the networks heal themselves. But then at the same time, we had a wealth of information in terms of what happened, where it happened, when it happened. And from that, we can piece together the problem, and then in that case, then go out and actually fix the problem. Because the technology isolates the problem, and then we often have to go and fix it.
And by healing
physically.
itself, it's resetting
It's
switches and-
healing itself through you, Mr. Mayor, isolating it and providing supply to that affected area from another source.
bypass and then.
Yes. Mhm.
Very neat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
We've got new technology on our desks apparently tonight. I wanted to first of all congratulate you on the results that you've got for the last year. They're obviously very wonderful. We appreciate the contributions you're making to our community. I also wanted to thank you for the contributions you made outside of the financial elements of OEC. Yesterday, Councillor Lachin and I had the joy of being in one of the bucket ride trucks that we had at the Northeast Oakville Fair, and we've got some, I don't know how much your hands are shaking while you're trying to take, while we're taking those photos, but we have some great photos associated with the fair and the outreach that the team that you sent to us provided. Lots of community members enjoyed the bucket ride and appreciate the fact that Oakville Hydro is out there for them day in and day out, no matter what time of day it might be, to make sure things are running properly. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Lachin.
So ditto on what Councillor Adams said, but I am going to ask a financial question. So Ms. Marner indicated that you have a healthy balance sheet. Congratulations on that. My question is about, from note 1, there's a number of subsidiaries that are noted there. So the question is, are any of these subsidiaries underperforming from what you expected? In other words, how's the ROI on those?
So every year we do a test of the financial viability of all of our businesses, and I am very pleased to report that they are all financially viable going operations and currently are all performing as expected.
Wonderful. I'm hoping that you can also maybe find some numbers for the next Lotto Max. That'd be great too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you very much for the presentation. A couple of questions. One of them, is there any pressure now to amalgamate more of the hydro commissions than we have had, or is it kind of settled down now?
To you, Mr. Mayor, it's settled down at the moment. It's always been an area of uncertainty, and it's gone up and down in terms of pressure, but at the moment it's more of a wait and see, and to see what the provincial government might do. But so right now I would say there's no additional pressure.
Okay, I think that's good news. The other question is, part two of the recommendation, it speaks of director compensation. Does that mean now all directors will receive that same compensation? Because a number of years ago, a councillor put forward that some people on the board wouldn't get any money. So is that sorted out now and everybody's going to get the same?
No, sir.
No?
No, council's policy supersedes that. The mayor and the CAO still don't get compensation because that's council's policy.
Okay, okay.
Only,
Yeah.
only,
No,
hint, hint, with a begging tone, only council can change that.
Okay, I'm glad I asked the question. Appreciate that. So and council can do that at any time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thanks for the answer.
Yeah, I didn't hear the motion to change that. All right, I'll take that as read. Thank you very much for the presentation. I would only ask that you just refresh for us your remarks in April about the triple you've delivered and the triple you're planning. It was just so pleasant to hear. I'd like to hear it again.
Well, in April, I did report and speak to council about how in the last 8 years we have tripled our financial results at Oakville Enterprises and through acquisition of a number of companies and growing a number of companies that we have. And we have ambitious plans to do that again over the next 8 years. And so we are quite aggressively trying to pursue those financial objectives.
Please and thank you very much. The taxpayers depend on it.
Thank you.
I wonder if I could look for a mover and seconder. Councillor Knoll and Councillor Lischina, and that's for all the recommendations here. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Thank you very much. And I want to say thank you to the board for coming. It means a lot to see so many of you here, and you've done very, very impressive work for the taxpayers, and we appreciate it. Council, the next item is the 2019 Heritage Grant Program on pages 117 to 122. And in addition to a mover and seconder, Councillor Giddings has something to add to it. So maybe you could move and amend and everything. We'll start with you anyway.
Well, I'd like to move it and amend it. I won't second it, though.
We'll leave something for someone else.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of Councillor Duddick, it's detailed in the report, but this is our 6th year, and close to $400,000 has been put out to assist those homeowners with heritage properties. And it's a great program, and we are just thrilled to be able to be part of it. It's very difficult deciding the amounts because we are becoming more and more oversubscribed every year. So what I would like to pass as amended is I handed out a spreadsheet earlier. The highlighted yellow cell is different than the one that's in the report, and it talks about structural repairs. And what that is the owner of the property has done a fair amount of work on the house, and the structural repair was for a failed support in the roof of the property. And so that was done prior to the windows, and the windows were the original item on there. Same amount of money, so just like to ask for that to be amended as shown.
All righty. And the seconder is Councillor Hazard-Thiel. Is everybody okay with that? Everybody understands it? May I put to vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Now we come to Bill 108. We have a presentation from staff that I'm looking forward to, and I just want to, I'll wait till the presentation is over, but I have some late-breaking news to update everybody with. So here we go, any second now. Help is on the way.
All right, here we are, item number 3. Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council. Tonight, Paula Adamson, Sue Shappert, and I are going to present a snapshot of the changes proposed through Bill 108 and described in our staff report. And afterward, we'll do our best to field your questions with support from the rest of the team. May 2nd. May 2nd was a big day. The province released a new growth plan, which came into effect last week on May 16th. And as well, a housing supply action plan and the related Bill 108. The proposed More Homes, More Choice Act 2019. Bill 108 proposes amendments to 13 different pieces of provincial legislation. Tonight, in our presentation, we're going to focus on the big three: the changes to the Development Charges Act, the Ontario Heritage Act, and the Planning Act. We'll also touch on or weave in a discussion about the changes to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal Act, because they're related to changes in the Planning Act and the Ontario Heritage Act. Overall, the engagement timeframe for this initiative has been far too short and did not allow for sufficient analysis and discussion on issues as important as housing supply and affordability. The initial housing supply consultation document was released just 6 months ago, and the commenting period included the winter holiday break. Then, just 3.5 weeks ago, Bill 108 was released, barely enough time to get a report to this council and meet the June 1st commenting deadline for the 3 related postings about the Big Three acts on the Environmental Registry of Ontario. The key takeaways we're hoping to present to you tonight about Bill 108 are, as mentioned, the time frame did not allow for sufficient consultation, analysis, and discussion. Bill 108 proposes, among other things, to undo many of the changes introduced through Bill 139, which was the subject of a lot of consultation. Bill 108 has little to do with housing choices and affordability. It would undermine the concept that growth should pay for growth. It would significantly impact the town's financial planning for growth-related capital works. At this point, it appears that the proposed changes to development charges and the proposed new community benefits charge would result in funding shortfalls that may increase reliance on debt and property taxes. Bill 108 does not include enough information. No regulations were provided with the bill, so we have yet to determine the full impact. Bill 108 would also eliminate deference to council's position with respect to heritage conservation and planning decisions. Appeals of heritage designation bylaws would be decided by the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal instead of being reviewed by the Conservation Review Board and referred back to council. This could erode the conservation of local heritage resources as mandated by the province. And appeals of planning applications would be subject to the old OMB rules, which would result in much longer de novo hearings, whereby LPAT adjudicators would be able to go back to the beginning when considering a planning matter, ignoring a municipal council's decision. Bill 108 would also reduce development review timelines that were established after extensive consultation with municipalities. So up next, we have Paula Adamson to talk about the proposed changes to the Development Charges Act.
Key changes to the Development Charges Act include eligible services. Eligible services are proposed to consist of a prescribed list of predominantly hard services only: roads, transit, and fire in the town's case. As a lower tier municipality, the town will be particularly impacted by the removal of soft services from DCs. It will lessen the town's ability to recover the growth-related costs of parks, recreation, libraries, and parking. This will increase reliance on debt and property taxes in the near term. Calculation and timing of payment. The current legislation provides that DCs and cash in lieu of parkland are determined and payable at building permit issuance based on current rates for DCs and prescribed land valuation in the case of cash in lieu of parkland. Section 37, or bonusing, is determined in accordance with the now enforced Planning Act and town policies, and is also payable at building permit for monetary requirements. The proposed legislation would require the amount of DCs to be determined and locked at the earlier of site plan or zoning amendment application date. These locked rates would not be payable until the earlier of permit issuance or occupancy, which could be many years apart. In addition, rental, nonprofit housing, institutional, commercial, and industrial developments will be permitted to spread DC payments over 6 years, beginning at occupancy. There are provisions to charge interest between the locked value and final payment date, but at an unknown prescribed rate. In addition, unpaid amounts may be added to property taxes. However, these provisions may not be sufficient to recoup the added administrative cost or loss to municipal cash flows. Secondary dwelling exemption. The DCA currently exempts from DCs the creation of up to 2 additional dwelling units subject to specific criteria in an existing dwelling. Bill 108 takes off the cap of 2 units for existing dwellings and adds a further exemption for creating more units in new residential and ancillary structures yet to be defined. While the impact on planning processes and revenues will need to be assessed, it appears that this may be the one measure in the proposed legislation that may encourage additional housing. Transitional provisions. Existing DC bylaws will remain in force until the earlier of the date it is repealed, the date a new community benefits charge bylaw is passed, or at an unknown prescribed date. Municipalities will require sufficient time to undertake the requirements of the new legislation when enacted and pass the necessary new bylaws. Therefore, the prescribed transition date will be critical to determining how quickly municipalities will be forced to transition to the new DCA requirements and CBC requirements. Without the regulations, it is extremely difficult to determine the impacts to the town. Less than anticipated DC revenues were already pushing out community infrastructure in the capital forecast. As noted in this slide, the town's current 10-year capital forecast reflects $101.5 million in DC funding allocated to growth-related community infrastructure. Staff will be providing an assessment of the financial impacts on the town to the Budget Committee when the yet-to-be-released details are received from the province. And I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thank you. As Leslie has already mentioned, one of the biggest changes to the Ontario Heritage Act is that all appeals for Part 4 and Part 5 designated properties will now go forward to the LPAT, where previously they had gone to, some of them at least, to the Conservation Review Board. The Conservation Review Board has been removed from all Part 4, that's individually designated property processes. And instead of providing a recommendation back to council after a CRB hearing, the LPAT will now make the final decision. This is concerning to us, partially because the LPAT does not have any requirement for heritage expertise in its adjudicators, and they may consider issues that are outside of Ontario Regulation 906, which is what defines cultural heritage value. Also of concern are the proposed changes regarding the regulations, which, as both Leslie and Paula have noted, are still unknown. There are a number of new phrases included in the proposed amendments regarding prescribed event, prescribed criteria, and prescribed principles. All of these things have the potential to make significant impacts on how Oakville can preserve its heritage properties. And these regulations should be subject to consultation with municipalities such as Oakville and other stakeholders. This is one of the unknown regulations I've just referenced. There is a new clause that would restrict heritage designation to occur within 90 days after a prescribed event. While we don't know for sure what the entire list of prescribed events will be, information sessions that have been hosted by the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport have indicated that it is likely that a complete planning application will be one of these prescribed events. If this is the case, it will disrupt the town's ability to work with developers who support heritage, causing additional delays in processes to partners who are willing to work with us. It also means that the town may be forced to begin the designation process without all necessary information, just in order to ensure that the possibility of designation remains open to us. The new definition of alteration will also create some special challenges for the town. It will impact our existing heritage permit process and will require that notices of intention of demolish or removal for even one heritage attribute of a property will be required to be published in a local newspaper following council's decision. This will increase negative perceptions of heritage and cause additional delays for property owners. With the introduction of the complete application concept into the Ontario Heritage Act, it may have some helpful components. However, the proposed changes right now fail to include what happens if an application is deemed incomplete. The prescribed contents of a complete application has yet to be defined by regulation. The proposed changes also include the creation of a new two-tier objection process for Part 4 designations under the Ontario Heritage Act. Currently, following a report to Heritage Oakville and then to Council, once the town issues a notice of intention to designate, a property owner has 30 days to object to that designation. If an objection is received, it goes directly to the Conservation Review Board, who holds a hearing and makes a recommendation back to Council. Council has the final determination as to whether or not to pass a heritage designation bylaw. Under the proposed new process, the town will still issue a notice of intention to designate, but any objections received at that point within the 30-day period will come back to Council. Council will then have to determine if that objection merits reconsideration of their decision or not, and they will have the choice at that time to actually pass a heritage designation bylaw. However, after the passage of a bylaw, there is a new 30-day appeal period whereby the property owner can make an appeal to the LPAT. And of course, once it gets to the LPAT, following the conclusion of a hearing, they make a binding decision on Council. There are also interim protection measures that currently exist through the Notice of Intention to Designate process, which are unclear if they will still exist in the bylaw appeal process. So right now, once the town issues a Notice of Intention to Designate, the property is, for all intents and purposes, treated as though it is designated. Heritage permits are required while the matter is resolved. While that provision still remains in the proposed amendments, there have been no additions of provisions of protection, interim protection, during the bylaw appeal process, which is concerning to staff. And finally, there are new notice requirements included for the listing of properties under Section 27 on Oakville's Heritage Register. There is now a requirement for the town to issue notice following the addition of a property to the Heritage Register, which we already do as a customer service initiative. The only thing we'll change there will be the content of our notice. However, the proposed amendments have also included a new process to object to a property being listed on the Heritage Register. Currently, if a property owner wants to make a determination as to whether or not their property should be on the Heritage Register or not, they go through a Notice of Intention to Demolish process, whereby demolition is not actually required, but it does require Council to make a decision whether or not the property has actual cultural heritage value instead of potential cultural heritage value. This new objection process has no clear defined timeline and will be added on in addition to those existing processes regarding demolition. And I'll turn it back to Leslie.
As for the changes to the Planning Act, further to what Paula said about the proposed new community benefits charge, and in terms of planning, the new community benefits charge will jeopardize municipalities' ability to provide complete communities. The community facilities or soft services proposed to be included in the charge are necessary to support development in accordance with the growth plan. Because of this, more consultation is requested, as this charge must be sufficient to meet the needs of growth and development. The flip side of this is that for parkland, the current ability to use an alternative parkland dedication rate would be eliminated. There's been zero consultation on this. As you know, the livability of communities and the creation of complete communities is dependent on parkland. And as such, there should be consultation on appropriate new parkland standards achieved through the CBC bylaw and transition provisions. The proposed changes to the Planning Act include some unrealistic timelines for processing development applications. Under Bill 108, development review timelines would be reduced to shorter than pre-Bill 139 levels and impact staff's ability to consult with the public. The existing development review timelines, which were determined after extensive consultation, should be maintained. The province should also mandate a pre-consultation process to identify and potentially resolve issues early on in the development review process. The province should also allow municipalities to deem an application incomplete for qualitative reasons, like when a supporting study doesn't provide sufficient analysis. With respect to the appeals process, the changes to the Planning Act and the corresponding changes to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal would effectively erase the OMB reform that resulted from extensive consultation beginning in 2016 and reinstate the former powers of the Ontario Municipal Board. The changes would remove the restricted grounds for appeals, and as such, consistency and conformity of a municipality's existing official plan or zoning bylaw would no longer be a test. The LPAT would also revert to holding lengthy adversarial de novo hearings where it would determine the best planning outcome. For these reasons, there should be consultation, more consultation, especially with respect to transition provisions. Other proposed changes to the Planning Act include the replacement of the existing provision for development permitting with what's being called community planning permitting, and that would be required in specified areas. Again, we don't know where yet. Inclusionary zoning would be limited to major transit station areas or areas where a community planning permit system had been required. There's also proposal to provide for additional residential units, and that would authorize additional residential units for detached, semi-detached, and row houses in both the primary dwelling and ancillary building. And that would enable more affordable housing units. Has been a lot of talk about housing so far. So looping back to our key takeaways, the changes proposed through Bill 108 do not appear to provide for additional housing as intended. They may actually slow down the development approval process, as there is the potential for more and longer LPAT hearings. Further, the town's financial planning for growth-related community infrastructure will be compromised, as will the town's ability to conserve its cultural heritage resources. That concludes my presentation. The recommendation is before you in the staff report. We'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you to you and Paul and Susan. Councillor Adams.
Would you mind going back to, it might have been in slide 8, where you're talking about the revised funding methods that are going to be available to us? And in particular, the issue around the soft services, and maybe it was one back.
Here?
Where you talked about the $100 million that we currently have in our, no, I think it was backwards.
Oh, there.
It was in there somewhere.
Yes.
There, that's the one. Thank you. 9, not 8. Can you, as I understand this particular issue, this is putting at risk all of the all of the funding that would be required for community services in North Oakville. For example, the new 16-mile sports complex, the much talked about cricket field, a whole bunch of other facilities that are expected in North Oakville, as well as elsewhere in town. But in particular, some of these ones that this council has now had an awful lot of discussion about, particularly with my Ward 7 council colleagues here. That's absolutely the case?
Yes.
And have any of the community groups that are involved in the use of those kind of facilities been made aware of this risk through any consultation?
With a 30-day turnaround time for the actual, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm not sure if the public can hear you.
With a 30-day turnaround time to comment on the bill, there's been no opportunity for us to provide any opportunities to consult with the public on the changes that are coming through this act. We really have had enough time to review it ourselves and make this report to council.
So I totally understand that's the case. So where I'm going with this is there a way in which our community can be made aware of the risks to it from these proposed changes? Would it be appropriate, or could we engage with our community to make sure that our MPPs and our provincial counterparts understand the damage that this could do to our community?
We do have the opportunity actually to circulate this report to the Ratepayers Association, if that would be one way. Perhaps in the Chamber of Commerce as well as the 3 BIAs. So that would be an opportunity to get the information out to them in a short time for them to provide comments, because the deadline is the June 1st.
So it is it is a very complicated matter, and there are a whole bunch of really important things in here. But this one in particular, this very piece of it, is so central to what makes Oakville so livable in many cases that I think we need to create a super simple to understand, what's at risk kind of page that we could give to the residents associations, because I'm not sure a residents association or the average person would be able to read that and go, oh, this means the 16-mile sports complex. Oh, this means the cricket field. Oh, this means the park that's supposed to be built down the street. Those things are not obvious when you read that. Until it hits the ground, that's when you find out about it. I know that when we were going through the budget consultations this past year, it was loud and clear that people wanted to be able to have these various community things as soon as they could get them. And this is obviously going to push it back. Yes, we don't know what the regulations are that follow it, but I have a really bad sense of what they're going to say.
Certainly, fairly quickly, we can work with communications and draft a more simple version to outline specifically on this issue itself. And actually, Mr. Green has suggested we could actually circulate out to some of the sports organizations because they would certainly be impacted by their access to facilities.
And thank you. I think that would be an excellent idea. And the other area that's not fully described in this material is the effects on the library and the funding for renewal of it's not really renewal, it's the collections piece of the library, the new library facilities that are to come. And we've got members of the community who are part of the Friends of the Oakville Public Library, who I'm sure if they understood what the implications were, they would be very upset about it as well. And so I would like to include those groups as well. Chair of the board, Noel, you might have some further ideas on that particular issue as well.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. I can tell you that in Toronto's report on Bill 108, they reported that for a new library branch, these changes will add 17% to the cost of the library. So there's a hard number for you if you want one. Are there other questions? Councillor Chisholm?
Thank you, Worship. Just to add to Councillor Adams' comments with respect to the associations and RAs and so forth, the challenge we're going to have, and there seems to be a move afoot, which we've been very, very successful with the amalgamation issue. And I don't think I think there's confusion now with this and the amalgamation and how that relates. So I don't really know how we're going to communicate that. But the challenge will be, because everybody's on about the amalgamation, and it's more than that. And I think that's what we really need to drill down to our community groups and our organizations. This is more than about amalgamation. This is about bigger things. And how we do that is, and with the time frame, and I appreciate the frustration, because we don't even know the answers. But the reality of it is, there is a campaign on amalgamation, but I think we need to connect this Bill 108 with the amalgamation process. I just leave it as that. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor, I would suggest that staff have done an outstanding job under very difficult circumstances to brief us on the destructive power of Bill 108 to everything that makes Oakville, Oakville. And I will suggest to you that it's our job as mayor and council to take it to the street, and we will. And I think that, we just have to take this one step at a time, receive the information and authorize the submission, and then at the earliest possible date, the Office of Mayor and Council will bring back action plan. And now I have a long list, including some second timers. The next one is Councillor Elger.
Thanks so much for taking the time to put this presentation together. It's not a pretty picture you're painting, but I think it's pretty accurate. My question is relating to the slide before us right now, where it talks about the 10-year capital forecast and financing plan, which reflects $101.5 million. Now, that is based on the current development charges that we won't be able to collect, based on the current system, which still doesn't pay for the cost of growth. Can we roll it back to what it was in 1997 before they started gutting the Development Charges Act? Would that be possible? So that residents can really see what the true cost of growth is. Because this is a scrubbed value here, which has been dumbed down. And I don't mean you dumbed it down. I mean, we were forced to dumb it down based on we have to pay for some of the growth. Because I think this is a powerful slide you have. I'd just like to throw a little more at it.
Councillor, we will make it stronger when we take it to the street.
I'd love it. We might as well then toss in, if we could, the Regions portion too. And that would really send quite a message to Oakville residents.
Yes, there is a lot going on.
Oh, yeah.
The Oakville way of life is being attacked with an intent to destroy it. And this is the Developer Welfare Act. Let there be no mistake.
Oh, it's obvious, but I think we have a good army of people that if we get the information, they'll be good at
I'm very confident that our town knows how to fight back.
Okay, I thank you.
All right,
I look forward to the information.
Next on the list is Councillor Say.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I just wanted to echo your and Councillor Adams' comments, specifically around obviously the 60-mile sports complex and other facilities that we're waiting in Ward 7. Just along the point about disseminating the information and us being kind of the conduit for the public, are we able to have some additional communications that are shareable on social media when we're kind of putting those together with the communications team? That would be my request. And another idea that kind of popped into my head is, do we have the potential, and this may not be the proper forum, but do we have the potential to put notices or things of the like at our community centers so that people are aware of these potential changes?
Councillor, as I said, these are all, these communications steps, yes, we can communicate with the public, and really it's our job as mayor and councillor to do that. and we will have a program for you by your next meeting. I have some more information. This may even be the time to give it. The only public consultation by the province is this Friday for a few hours in front of a legislative committee. The province is planning to take the bill to third reading on June 4th. The emergency meeting of mayors and councillors and concerned public agencies and Environmental Defence Canada that I've spoken about previously to defend the communities against the damage from Bill 108 is going ahead on June 8th, even though that's after third reading, because obviously we're going to have a long view. We have to play a long game here in terms of fighting these effects. And at Laurier University on Saturday, June 8th, and I will circulate the information to council if any of you don't have it, people from all over the province are gathering to begin the fight against, the fight to regain livability in the planning rules. So I would urge you to turn your focus to the struggle, because that is what lies ahead of us, is a very big struggle. And just to complete the calendar, BUILD, which is the association of the developers and the land developers and the builders, they've scheduled their party to celebrate this for June 25th. So, there you go. Now, I don't know if we can turn on the overhead or not, but this is just one little detail that I don't think we covered quite as much as I'd like to see it covered. So let's see if we can get technical assistance to turn on the overhead, because I've put a graphic there. Now, what I'd like to do is zoom out enough to get both pages at the same time, if that's possible. And then the alternative. Okay, and can you tilt? All right, that's good enough. So what you have on the left is what the parkland system is now, and what you have on the right is what Bill 108 gives us. So the first thing to call your attention to is that the parkland dedication gets reduced to just 5% of the site area. There's no longer any regard for how many units. There's no longer any regard for density. And another way of viewing it is the lower panel, where you see on the left how large a green space you would get and how many people you could fit at 770 Lawrence Avenue West, which is an approved application in Toronto. And on the right, what Bill 108 would have made it. There's a 17% increase in units and a 17% increase in population, and parkland goes from 2.2 to 0.4. So literally, the new regime in Ontario intends to say to residents, no parkland for you. It's like, apparently we don't need no stinking parkland in this province, is the new policy. I thought this would fit on the overhead a little better than this, but anyway, it's good enough. I think you can all see it and understand it, right? Council, I have a copy for each of you of the larger report that this is from. I received this today from Environmental Defence Canada, who thought that you and our public might be interested to see the radical change to parkland. All right? So thank you, technical staff, for the overhead. We can go back to regular camera coverage. Councillor Giddings is the next speaker, and then Councillor Adams has an amendment. No, Councillor Adams doesn't. Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Robertson? No, yes? Councillor O'Meara and Councillor Hazlitt deal. You're going to be a while before you get to do your amendment. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pretty sobering there when we think of Midtown at some point in time when that comes through. If we're looking at 4,000 or 5,000 units at a reduction in DCs of $4,000 or $5,000. We're talking $20 million on something that the DCs don't cover the existing cost of growth. So I find it rather frustrating that you think this is going to assist us in growing our residents. The parkland dedication, guess we won't have too much parkland at Midtown. Anyways, you've mentioned the timing, thank you very much, for the legislature. I assume there will be the possibility of amendments during that as well. We've talked a number of times, and staff talked about regulations. For those people that may be watching this, the devil is in the details, and the details are regulations. So could you expand a little further upon that for people that may be watching?
Right. So on Friday, most of the mayors of the larger municipalities in Ontario met in Guelph and with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and that is the ministry in charge of the Planning Act. And following the meeting, the organization, through its chair, the mayor of Guelph, released a statement, and the highlights include that the mayors are united in concern about Bill 108, which could put at risk city's finances and ability to provide parkland, community facilities, and well-planned neighborhoods. And we called on the provincial government to defer the implementation of funding cuts so that the province and cities can work together on how to minimize the impact on the people we all represent and the services on which they depend. And so that, and we also called on the government to engage with Ontario cities on Bill 108 in order to meet the goals of housing choice and affordability in a meaningful and effective way, while respecting the role of municipal councils in planning decisions and protecting the financial sustainability of cities, and to extend the deadline for comments on Bill 108 from June 1st to September 30th to allow municipalities adequate time to comment and for the public to be included. So this is totally consistent with the recommendation that staff have brought forward to you. So I don't think there's any need to change that. And Councillor Giddings, does that satisfy your question?
It does, Mr. Mayor. I guess the concern is it's not over yet. We don't know what may further come about.
Well, that's right. You're in a blizzard of change, and so far none of it's been well thought out in advance. And you know, I was glad when the Premier agreed this morning to delay the requirement that municipalities create enough savings in their budgets to absorb the downloads that the Premier has sent our way. And more than a little concerned when a couple hours later we learned that he's also canceled the increase to the gas tax that he had promised us. So Ford giveth and Ford taketh away. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. In terms of the changes to the timing for reviewing applications down to 4 months, I asked this question at the region, and I appreciate understanding what the cost is from a staffing or what we need to do that. But do we know what the costs would be in order to meet those timelines? We have to hire additional staff, or do we have that information, or can we get that information?
Through you, Mayor Burton, at this point, we don't know what the implications would be for staffing. It depends on the volume of development applications. When we don't have the pressure to provide a complete record to council, and for that to be considered by the LPAT, then it's a bit of a different consideration, because it would be an entirely new hearing, a de novo hearing. So it's back to the beginning, and we can introduce new evidence. The applicants can introduce new evidence. So there may be more appetite to work with us and not appeal for non-decision immediately, but there could also be more appeals for non-decision. We don't know yet.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'm trying to just nail down the fact that there are additional costs by changing the timeframes and tightening it up. And it's not just the LPAT application at the end. You know, when we shorten it up, we need to up our staffing, or we need to have those costs in order to deal with those applications. And you know, for a government that has said that we're trying to find efficiencies by downloading shorter timelines onto us, it adds to our burden as well. So as long as we understand that and we're communicating that as well, that there's, you know, changing dates might seems like just do it quicker, but it's going to add costs. So, thanks.
Councillor, the province has announced that the municipalities are going to, for our next budget, going to have to cut our budgets by 4%. The clear result is we will need to process applications faster with less. The magic number for Oakville will be $8 million, and for the region of Halton will be $22 million. So whoever's on the budget committee is going to have a lot of fun, and you won't be there adding things that people want. You're going to be taking things away that people depend on. And let's be clear, the province is attacking the planning process itself. They are gutting local planning protection and policies. That is their clear intent here. And, you know, good luck to us. Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel?
Thank you for your presentation, and to the entire department and everyone who worked together. It certainly summarized in some of those slides just the massive impact we're about to have. I have a couple questions. You may not have the answers, but in regards to Midtown again. So one of the questions a couple of residents have asked is, will there be, if community planning permit system is put in place, will there be public consultation, or will the province, or have they signaled as the province that they will say, this is what will be built and this is how it will be built? Or will we still have some level of say from the public about that development?
Through you, Mayor Burton, my expectation is that it would be set up similar to the vision for the development permitting system. So that requires a lot of work on the front end. And years ago, the estimates were something in the order of 2 years, because you really have to do a detailed block-by-block plan and get community buy-in and council buy-in for the ultimate vision for an area. So if we use Midtown as the example, so that when a landowner submits an application, it can be approved fairly quickly, because it's essentially a checklist. This is achieving everything that's been set out in our community permitting system. I don't know if the province is thinking it would roll out that way, but that's my expectation, not having any details. That being said, with a proposed 45-day turnaround for a permit under that system, so let's say it's taken 2 years, we have a system, someone files for permit. I'm unclear on what happens in terms of infrastructure capacity. Like, if there's no water or road capacity, I don't know where that leaves us if someone has a 45-day permit.
So to follow up on that, so if, let's say this passes in the next month, and we're in September, and there's an application for 19 and 14 stories, and it happens to be Midtown, are we in a position where we would continue as we are, which is to have public consultation and to assess, do we have the infrastructure in place to support that? Or does this bill, in fact, say, jeopardize all of that?
One, we don't know all the rules yet. So in some respects, we are a little bit guessing just based on past practices. I think we'll say that as a proviso at the beginning. For Midtown, really the implication is in the ability to provide for the infrastructure through the development charges. The planning process, I'm assuming, would be retained the same way it is, with a 90-day turnaround time for a zoning amendment. So we do the same kind of consultation. To move to the permit system that they've suggested would be a whole other long process to define what that is in order to get to a permit. So permits wouldn't be in place right away. It would be the typical zoning application at the 90-day time frame. The questions about traffic and all those things we deal with in that zoning, that application. Our dilemma has always been in not providing for an application or not being in a position to approve an application when there isn't infrastructure to provide for it. And now being able to defend that position at an LPAT hearing at a later date. That does put us in some jeopardy.
That was exciting.
So thank you for that. I have one other question, and it's related to the concept of character of the neighborhood, so, which doesn't seem to have been commented on here, but when it comes to secondary units and additional units, et cetera, stable residential neighborhoods, I note that the DC charges would not be applicable for these additional units, and yet these are neighborhoods where it's older infrastructure. Is there not an argument to be made that because it's an older neighborhood, that the DC charges in fact are even more necessary if they're going to force us to go to additional residential in those neighborhoods?
Councillor, it'll be on the taxpayer.
Mr. Mayor, isn't it always on the taxpayer?
Well, it used to be that about 80% of it was on developers. And before 1997, it was 100%. And we live in such a marvelous world that the developers aren't rich enough, and they need the Developer Welfare Act, and Bill 108 is it. Ms. Sully.
Just to add to that, we are required to fund whatever is exempt under the Development Charge Act, which means that the taxpayer will have to collect those dollars and put them into a reserve fund to use to offset the shortfall in development charges.
Thank you for all your comments.
In other words, it's really ugly. Really ugly. Councillor Longo and then Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. With respect to the Heritage Act, could you just review again the impact with the Conservation Review Board no longer being involved? What is that implication on cultural heritage? I mean, we talk about parklands and the situation, but just briefly, by now going to LPAT, that implication is for cultural heritage, it goes to LPAT, it no longer, the Conservation Review Board is no longer involved.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I mean, essentially, municipal council can make a decision that can then be overturned by the LPAT, by members of the LPAT who may or may not have any heritage expertise working with the Ontario Heritage Act or the regulations that are in place either. Right now, it's hard to say what extent there will be. The regulations are a pretty important missing puzzle piece to help us determine that. But with the removal of the Conservation Review Board, we lose an outside panel of expertise to assist council with its decision making, and instead we rely on an outside body completely.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Commissioner, and would someone move the slide to the one that has the new test of appeals to the LPAT? You know, there was a slide that said, good planning or whatever it was, which I think is a code word for highest and best use, if I remember correctly.
Well, that slide is up. I just wanted to.
Here you are, the best planning outcome. If we're going to have one up in the background, let it be that one. That kind of illustrates the real threat to the community.
And just to highlight, I think something Sue was talking about. I'm sorry, this. Can you hear me? Another aspect that I'd highlight is that when we had gone to the Conservation Review Board on a designation, it gave the opportunity to identify the designation and the attributes, so that when you looked at the development application, you understood what those heritage attributes are. Now what it does is it puts heritage in the same arena as all of the other objectives, and there's no early identification except through, there's no early identification by council through a bylaw of the heritage attributes, it's actually put up to be balanced and competing with all of the other objectives at an LPAC hearing, which we really feel that decreases the ability for us to protect heritage.
Councillor Robertson?
I just wanted to go back to the additional residential units, which I'm assuming are not in new developments, they're in existing areas. And I look at Ward 1 as a place that, you know, does not have as much development, but has many houses that have the size to possibly rent out to 1, 2, or 3 renters. Do we have any control over that in terms of, like, if this comes in, this is done deal and residents don't have any say on it? Through you, Mayor Burton, I'm not sure, is the short answer. We don't have the regulations, and I don't know how much local determination will be involved in terms of even, you know, parking and things like that. So in my non-expertise area still, once something comes in effect, how much time before anything happens at the town level with that?
How soon do you get an application?
Okay, so if somebody the next day said, hey, you're going to see ads saying, hey, I have a room to rent.
When the legislation gets royal assent, it's in effect. And then, once that's happened, the government proclaims parts of the bill as the regulations come available. So it's, we don't know how long this piece of string is yet.
Okay, thank you.
Right?
Yes. I would also add that, and I just wanted some clarity, secondary suites are already a requirement in the Planning Act now. I think as Leslie says, the question is, can we attach parking standards to it? Can we attach other things to it? We don't know.
So I could put a tiny house in my backyard right now?
For all we know, you'll see them in people's front yards. Councillor Elgar.
Just quickly, I think if everyone takes the time to read the Globe and Mail today about Mattamy billionaire Peter Gilligan takes home affordability, government interference, and moving beyond housing, done by Trevor Cole, it's a really good read, and you can see who the advisors were for all this Bill 108 that's coming out. It kind of sums it up very well.
Doesn't it? Councillor Adams, you have an amendment. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
Councillor Adams would like to add item number 8, that council directs staff to work with the Office of Mayor and Council to inform the public on the risks to our community from Bill 108.
Thank you very much for reading that. This is more like the More Homes, Fewer Gardens Act. And that is a serious damage to the way we live in Oakville. And we've had tons of discussions tonight about all of the impacts of all of this crazy omnibus bill that's being put forward. And the reason I'm asking for the extra item to be put forward is to make sure that your office has the opportunity to put together a full set of information. And if that means putting out a proper mailing, putting out electronic messaging to various residents, that opportunity is made available and that it can happen as required or needed. And so that's why I think it's important in this circumstance to do that. Back on May 13th, we authorized additional funding to deal with another piece of legislation that was damaging to the way that we do business and the way we live in Oakville. And here we are with yet another attack on our livability.
You've worded it perfectly to make that happen. All right. We may have exhausted comment and questions. We need a mover and seconder. Councillor Haslett-Deal, and would someone over here like to be the seconder on it? Councillor Knoll, all those in favor, including item number 8. I think it's understood. No one voted against. It was all in favor. That's unanimous. And someone is calling for a recorded vote. Everybody wants a stretch break. So to be recorded in favor of the item, please stand and stretch to be named. Do we stretch with me? Well, we've been sitting for a time, haven't we? Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Hazard-Thiel, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Longo, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Adams, Councillor Lischina, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Sanju, and Mayor Burton. I declare the measure carried unanimously. Now, Council, we have a confidential discussion item, and I'm going to slip that down so that we can do item number 4 in public first, and that would be the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee. We need a mover and second for the recommendations and for the receipt. Councillor O'Meara and Councillor Chisholm. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. You have your information items circulated electronically and your status of outstanding issues. And you have, we now have new business. And does anybody here have a notice of motion or emergency or congratulatory or condolence? Councillor Robertson.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge the wonderful support of the Oakville and Burlington community this past Monday at the 14th Annual Halton Walk to End ALS. I have a personal connection to the walk and a great pride in the event, which was started by my daughter Lindsay when she was 16 years old. My husband Tim was diagnosed with ALS in 2004 and attended every walk until his death in 2016. He was an inspiration to all of us, and the importance of the equipment and the research from that walk is incredible for the clients that are still suffering from this disease. This year's walk brought us up to $1 million raised over the last 14 years, almost $1,100,000 raised over the last 14 years. And for that, I want to say thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Adams?
I have 2 items. First is actually one of the information items. If I can draw us back one stage in our agenda, please. And that is, there's a resolution that was passed regarding the UPass program by Brampton, and that was passed on May 8th, and we received the material on May 16th. And I wondered if our staff either have any additional information, because as I understand it, some of the MPPs have said that they were going to go meet with Sheridan. I don't know if there's been any further information from that, and if not, if our staff would be able to provide an update memo at a later date. Thank you. And the other is, in fact, an item of new business. It's an item of congratulations. Can I proceed with that? Thank you. I wanted to, on behalf of the 4th Annual Northeast Oakville Fair, congratulate the community on yet another very successful event that we had yesterday. The Fair Committee, which was this year chaired by Rashad Nazir and supported by Maureen Taylor Organi, Bill Smith, and Sonia Albouri, as well as Councillor Lischina and myself, and of course Mayor Burton. Thank you for your partnership on it. We had a number of great sponsors in the community. The cooperators through Matt Donahue was the presenting sponsor this year, and we had platinum sponsors, New News Dentistry, Oakville Academy for the Arts, Dave & Buster's. We had gold sponsors, South Oakville Fit Body Boot Camp, Orange Theory Fitness, F45 Joshua Creek, Oakville Soccer Club, Remax through Bill K. Silver sponsors, Appleby College Camps, Katie Davidson, Idea Lab East Oakville, Checkers Fun Factory, Viva Retirement Community, Toronto Pearson International Airport, Goldfish Swim School, Global Pet Foods, 9 Round Boxing Fitness, Audio Man, Halton Eye Care, numerous volunteers through RBC. We had the Oakville Public Library, we had Orbit Robotics, we had Oakville Hydro, as you heard earlier, we had Oakville Fire, we had Films.ca providing fantastic popcorn. I understand 3,500 bags of popcorn went out the door on Sunday. Waffles International, which is owned by a local businessman, handed out 1,000 waffles yesterday. Signorama supported us. We had the police there as well. which we very much appreciated. We had a number of food trucks. We think we had somewhere in the order of 4,000 people come through during the day. And all told, with all the various supports, the sponsors, the in-kind support, there was, it was an event in the order of $40,000 to $50,000 in value that was provided to the community. And so we very, very much appreciate the support of our staff who helped us along the way, going through the various hoops that needed to be done. We had a great support through Hedda Slima, who took over from Rebecca last year, and we appreciate all of that. So thank you very much to all the various supporters. I know a number of you managed to come out and enjoy a little bit of the sun with us. I know I've got the sunburn to prove just how good the weather was, despite the torrential rainstorms we had on Saturday. So thank you very much, and congratulations to the committee.
Councillor, I salute your ward. The sense of community spirit is very important to the safety and the well-being of a community. I remember when you started this and how much work it seemed like. Looks to me like you've got a great volunteer group helping you out now.
We do. In fact, we had volunteers from all over the community, not just Northeast Oakville. We had something in the order of 50 or 60 volunteers out helping to make the day run so smoothly. And I can tell you, we had residents from not just Northeast Oakville showing up. We had residents from all over Oakville showing up. So we cater to all.
Well, very well done. Councillor Elgar?
Just a quick note for all members of council. I learned tonight that our security guard, Ernie, which everybody knows, his last shift at the town is tonight at midnight. So on your way out, please stop by and say hi to him. And it was a bit of a surprise to know that. So we all loved Ernie. Thank you.
We do. Thank you very much for that. For my part, Councillor Lischina.
I did want to echo everything that Councillor Adams said. That was an amazing fair, and thank you to everyone. I do also have another note of congratulations. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge a distinguished Oakville resident by the name of Marianne Krill. She has been appointed as judge to the Superior Court of Justice of Ontario. Justice Krill is a first-generation Canadian of Ukrainian descent. She did her undergraduate work at Queen's University, graduated with a gold medal in sociology. She went to earn a master's degree and began her PhD studies before she decided she needed to learn a trade, and she chose the law. She graduated from University of Toronto with prizes in administrative and family law and a 3-month-old baby boy. She was awarded the Treasurer's Medal for the highest standing in the bar admission course, and went on to practice commercial litigation in the leading firm in Toronto. She then spent 2 years at home raising her baby daughter, who is now in second year in veterinary school at Guelph University. Justice Krill returned to practice law in Oakville and focused on family law. She remained with O'Connor McLeod Hanna for 17 years before embarking on her own family practice in 2009. Last year, her son Michael, remember the one that was born when she was getting the bar, passing the bar, he has now joined her in her law office, and she has acted also as a dispute resolution officer for the Superior Court in Milton since inception of the program, and in 2006 was the first woman to receive the Award of Excellence for the Halton County Law Association. Justice Krill lives in Oakville with her husband, who is now a retired Justice Terence O'Connor, and we want to congratulate her on her appointment. Congratulations, Justice Krill.
Yes, indeed. And as I understand it, these appointments are made by Ottawa. So, hey, look, Ottawa made a good decision.
Yes, they did.
I would like to congratulate the We Love Oakville Stop Amalgamation Group. Today, in fact, a minute ago, the count of letters and emails against amalgamation that they have generated hit 1,412, and quite a few came in today. So the word is still spreading, and they're still doing an outstanding job. There has never been this size of outpouring of public sentiment on any issue in our history. This is double anything that ever happened before, and it doesn't look like it's stopping yet. So well done to the residents' associations who did that. I think we should move on to regional reports and question period regarding town boards and advisory committees, and I'm not aware of any questions. And we now have requests for reports, and the chair recognizes Councillors Longo and Giddings.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I'm asking for a report on climate change, and whereas the town of Oakville has been actively working to reduce its carbon and environmental impacts for the last 10 years through various programs, plans, and initiatives, and whereas Council adopted the priorities to create a climate change resilient community and transition to a low carbon future in the 2019 to 2022 Council Strategic Plan, and whereas the town of Oakville is participating in the Partners for Climate Protection program, whereas the town of Oakville is implementing an energy conservation and demand management plans for its own operations, whereas the town of Oakville is a member of the Global Covenant of Mayors, whereas the town of Oakville is building LEED certified town facilities, whereas the town of Oakville is implementing the 2014 climate change strategy as part of the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities program, and has completed milestone number 5. Whereas the town of Oakville is developing a community energy plan for community members to help fight climate change. And whereas Oakville residents have heightened awareness for the need for everyone to get involved and take action to fight climate change, therefore be it resolved, Council requests the staff report back to Council in June regarding the town of Oakville's strategic approach to dealing with climate change, the climate change emergency, initiatives done to date by the town to mitigate and adapt to climate change, and finally, what residents in Oakville can do to tackle the climate change challenge at home and in the community.
Thank you, Councillor Longo. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's fitting that this request comes on the same day that Commissioner Bell brought Council up to date on Lake Ontario's water level, now up by 1.72 meters. There's a growing level of interest in our changing climate and the devastating effect that we are experiencing. I look forward to the receipt of this report and the initiatives that Oakville's councils have put in place, as well as Council's continued commitment to our climate, and how we may work together with our residents to achieve further reductions. And at the appropriate time, Mr. Mayor, request a recorded vote.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Any other speakers, or shall I call the vote? Those wishing to be recorded in support of the measure, please rise to be named. Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Haslett-Deal, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Longo, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Adams, Councillor Lischina, Councillor Palmer, and Councillor Sanju and Mayor Burton. I declare the measure carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Council, I just note for the public's benefit that there is a motion, a notice of motion on tonight's agenda considering autism spectrum disorder funding and services that is moved by Councillor Dudek, who is regrets this evening, unfortunately, and seconded by Councillor Elgar. And that's to be considered at the next council meeting to be held on June 24th. And so I hope that everybody who's interested in that will please take notice of that. And now I slipped down to the end, and we've reached the end, the confidential items so that we could go into camera without inconveniencing any members of the public who might have been interested in the public portion of the meeting. So we've done all the public portion except for the passing of the bylaws. And so now I need a motion that council proceed into closed session for the purpose of receiving a verbal update from the Director of Human Resources regarding labor relations or employee negotiations. And Councillor O'Meara and Councillor Palmer, Councillor Sanju. All those in favor? And that carries. Madam Clerk, would you set up the council chamber for a meeting closed to the public? All right, thank you, everybody. Council has met in a session, closed session, for the purpose of receiving a verbal update from the Director of Human Resources regarding labor relations or employee negotiations. And we now need a motion and a seconder that the verbal update from the Director of Human Resources given in closed session be received. Councillor Longo and Councillor Palmer, thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to the end of the agenda, and we now need a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of the bylaws. Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Liz Chinna. This is for the bylaws as presented in the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are adopted. That completes our work. Thank you very much for your time and attention. It's been great working with you, and we are adjourned.